So, you know Ian McGilchrist's work, it was phenomenal. The psychiatrist, neuroscientist, it's a Scottish. He wrote The Master and His Emissary about the right and left hemispheres of the brain, the hemispherically lateralized brain, where the right side of the brain asks the big questions, but doesn't actually come up with the answers, because the biggest questions in life don't have answers. They only have understanding. Now, the left side actually solves complicated problems. The right side deals with complex problems. Complex and complicated are fundamentally different insofar as complicated problems, they're hard to find the solutions to, but once you have the solutions, you can replicate them with almost effortless ease.
Right. You can make them into an algorithm.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and the left hemisphere is actually specialized for algorithm production. Right?
Exactly right. And that's the reason that you use the left side of the brain disproportionately when you're looking at social media or using technology. Engineering solutions are left brain solutions. The right brain problems are those that have very easy answers. We won the football game. They lost the football game. She fell in love with me. She didn't fall in love with me. I have something I want to do. I don't have something that I want to do. But you can't answer the questions. You can only have an understanding of the questions. And to come to the understanding of those questions, you have to sit in the right hemisphere of your brain. And to sit in the right hemisphere of your brain, you have to be undistracted and let your mind wander. To stimulate the default mode network in your brain, which is intensely uncomfortable. Because we hate boredom. When you were at Harvard, Dan Gilbert, your colleague Dan Gilbert, who's wonderful, social psychologist, he did all those experiments about people being bored. So he would put people in a room for 15 minutes with nothing to do, except they had a button in front of them. You remember these experiments?
No,
if they
not
touch
specifically.
the button, they get a painful electric shock.
Oh, yes.
And it turned out that 80% of the participants shocked themselves rather than letting their default mode network run free.
Even animals will do that.
Yeah.
Bored animals will shock themselves.
Absolutely. And one, they had to throw out this particular guy because he was such an outlier, shocked himself 190 times in 15 minutes. We hate boredom. We hate the default mode network. But unless you engage the right hemisphere of the brain and the default mode network by purposively just walking and repetitively praying, unless you manually stimulate that part of your brain, you are not going to come to understanding about the why of your life. You're going to be stuck on the how and what. And you're going to be path dependent, and I knew that.
Perhaps part of that discomfort. So Carl Friston, we did some work in this regard too. Carl Friston has associated negative emotion, anxiety more specifically, with high entropy states. So, and you can think about a high entropy state as a state of navigation where a very large number of pathways are potentially open to you, right? And so if you open Pandora's box, if you move away from a determinate goal and you open Pandora's box, which is what direction should I go, then that is anxiety provoking because there's a multitude of possibilities that beckon. Now, there's opportunity in that, but it can easily overwhelm you, especially if you're tilted more strongly towards negative emotion, let's say. So the problem with opening up a space of contemplation is that open spaces are unprotected and high entropy. And so there's negative emotion.
For sure.
Well, that's why we know too that the default emotion associated with right hemisphere activation is negative emotion.
It tends to be
apprehension.
high negative affect. And so you're familiar with the PANAS test, the positive affect, negative affect sequence, which is I administer it to all my students at Harvard. I make them take this because I put them into 4 categories. The high positive, high negative category. That's high affect people. That's you and me, which are the mad scientist profile. The high positive, low negative, which everybody wants to be, which is actually not great for a lot of things, which is the cheerleader.
It makes the impulsive.
Yeah, that's the cheerleader. And they make bad bosses too, by the way, because they can't take criticism or hear bad news. You have people who are high negative and low positive, which is the poets. And then the people who are low affect, low, those are the judges. Very, very low affect, sober.
Stolid.
They make good surgeons, right? You don't want somebody to cut you open and say, oh my God. That's not what you want. And so I actually categorize people and then talk about the strengths and weaknesses that each one of these has. Now, the people who are most likely to be able to affect discernment most at least conventionally by undertaking these techniques are the mad scientists. Because they have access to very high levels of affect, but they have to understand themselves to do that. This was the thing. I had this background as a behavioral scientist, and I wanted to know the why of my life And from that to figure out the direction forward or uphill, as you say. So
that was two questions.
Yeah.
The why and the direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Why is that two questions rather than one?
Well, the why of life is really the meaning of it all. And then once you understand the meaning, then you can figure out what direction you're going in, because the direction per se is not meaning.